Father Michael Renninger tells a story about a little boy who had two parents who loved him very much. And the boy loved to be carried in his parents' arms. When he was carried by his mother, he would deeply inhale the blend of perfume and powder and skin that was uniquely hers. It made him feel safe and secure and content. But he also loved being carried by his father. He would ride on his father's shoulders and laugh out loud as he surveyed the world from this new perspective. But even more than that, he loved the time of each evening when his father picked him up and carried him up the stairs from the living room to his bedroom and tucked him into bed. One night he realized when he was being carried up the stairs that as he rested his head against his father's chest and listened carefully, he could hear the beating of his father's heart. So he said to his father, "I can hear your heartbeat." And as the father gently laid him in bed, the man placed his ear against his son's chest and said, "And I can hear your heartbeat." It became a ritual for the two of them. Each night the boy would say, "I can hear your heartbeat," and the father would reply with the words, "And I can hear your heartbeat." It turned into sort of a code for good night and I love you. Well, eventually the boy grew into a teenager, and he got to where he was too big to be carried by his parents. And like most kids his age, he decided that his parents were the most embarrassing people he knew. They didn't seem to know anything, and the boy could hardly wait until he got old enough to move away. Well, in due time, he did. He graduated from high school and moved off to college in another town, and eventually he met the man of his dreams. They fell in love, got married, and decided to adopt children of their own. And that's when he came to the conclusion that maybe his parents weren't so dumb after all. They had done a pretty good job of raising him after all, so that he was able to do the same for his own children. Well, the young man's mother died of a heart condition, but he saved one of her sweaters. And when no one was in the room, he would take the sweater out and inhale deeply, breathing in her smell and returning in his mind to a day of innocence, one of safety and security and contentment. His father lived longer, but he grew weak and frail. One day the young man came for a visit only to find his father lying on the kitchen floor surrounded by a puddle of melted ice cream. You see, he had fallen and he couldn't get up. So the young man cleaned his father up, gently lifted the frail body into his arms, and carried him into the bedroom. And as the son lowered his father into the bed, the father looked into his son's eyes and said, "I can hear your heartbeat." Few things are more intimate than hearing the heartbeat of another person. Whether it's the heartbeats of a parent and their child, or the heartbeats of two lovers as they rest against each other, or the heartbeat of a dying loved one preparing for the next leg of their journey. And when we look at old photographs or hold souvenirs from days gone by, or bury our face in the clothing item of a loved one who has passed away, it's our own way of once again hearing their heartbeat. The sleeves of a brown jacket I wear when it gets cool or getting frayed at the ends, but I continue to wear it because it belonged to my father. I hear his heartbeat when I put it on. In this morning's gospel, we are given a prayer that invites God to hear our own heartbeat, while also allowing us to hear God's. It's Luke's own version of the familiar prayer we know from the Gospel of Matthew, the one we recite at funerals, pray in times of distress, and sing each Sunday before receiving Holy Communion. Luke's shortened version seemed to meet his and his audience's needs better than Matthew's, much the same way that my version of Father Renninger's story was altered a bit in a way that may speak to yours and my circumstances. There are differences between the two versions of the prayer, but there are also similarities. And one of them is the name of the one to whom the prayer is addressed. Most translations say Father. Some use the original Aramaic Abba. But both words have limited use because however we address God, whatever words we use to define God, those words can never be sufficient in describing the one in whom we live and move and have our being. The author of Matthew's Gospel uses female imagery, a mother hen gathering her chicks under her wings as an image of divine love. The Psalms describe God as a rock and a mighty fortress to illustrate the unshakable protection of God. In the book of Deuteronomy, God is described as an eagle which stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, spreading its wings to catch them in its feathers. But when Jesus' disciples asked him what words to use when they prayed, he taught them to address God like you would a loving parent. Some of us may get hung up thinking Jesus was emphasizing the maleness of God when he said Father, which is just plain silly because God is neither male nor female. I believe Jesus was instead trying to emphasize our intimate connection with God, the heartbeat, if you will, of God when we use language like Father, Daddy, Mother, or Mama, or Grandmother, or Grandfather. This morning's prayer is like a sweater into which we bury our faces, inhaling deeply the aroma of God's love and care for us. It's a prayer that longs for justice and equality in our world, one which cries out for enough food to eat, one which begs God for forgiveness where we fail while asking for the ability to offer forgiveness of debts to others. It's one which asks for God's protection during times of trial. These would have been the needs of a first century person. But what are yours? What are your deepest needs? What does your heartbeat sound like as you lie against God's breast? Maybe it's the fear and desperation you feel as you juggle your finances, possibly even working yourself into credit card debt, but seeing no way out of it. Maybe your heartbeat sounds like the empty loneliness that envelops you while you wonder if you will ever find someone to love you the way you need to be loved. Maybe your heartbeat is the sound of exhaustion from juggling multiple jobs and dealing with the day-to-day ups and downs of family life. Maybe your heartbeat is the pain of loss in your life, a pain that no one knows about. Whatever it sounds like, Jesus tells us God is not some far-off deity sitting on a throne, but instead as near and as intimate as your heartbeat. And if you listen very carefully, you can also hear God's heartbeat, a never-ending rhythmic pulse of love and care, one that has the ability to sustain us through grief and pain, one which gives us courage in times of fear and anxiety, and one that allows us to soar through our heavens of joy and bliss. God's heartbeat nurtures us. We need this exchange between us, between God and each of us. We need it or we will die. We will die spiritually just as surely as we will die physically. So listen for it. Listen for the heartbeat of God while offering God the sound of your own. And begin with the word that works best for you. Address God with your own word, one that represents for you an image of unconditional, unending, unimaginable love. Rest in the presence of God, knowing that God will never abandon you. There's nothing you can ever do which would cause God to turn away from you or be ashamed of you. Receive God's love and be blessed. Amen.